Claire Whitmore stepped out of the rideshare car and stared at the grand estate in front of her. The Whitmore family had money, just not the part of the family she came from. Her mother had married for love, not wealth, and now Claire stood alone on the gravel driveway of a wedding she couldn't afford to attend. The estate looked like something pulled from the cover of a bridal magazine. White drapery over polished wooden archways, fairy lights twinkling in the midday sun, and perfectly groomed guests laughing and sipping chilled rosé under garden tents. Everything glistened. Everyone sparkled. Except her. Claire smoothed the skirt of her pale blue dress. It was a size too big and a decade out of style. She had found it buried in the back of a thrift store bin 3 towns over, tagged at $5 and forgotten by time. Her heels wobbled as she took a step, scuffed beige pumps that had once belonged to her mother. She knew she looked wrong. Her dress was wrong. Her makeup was wrong. Even her smile felt wrong. But she had promised Sarah, her cousin, that she would be here. They were childhood best friends once, playing hide-and-seek at family picnics and braiding each other's hair during sleepovers. That was before life took different turns, before the fire, before the therapy sessions and the eviction notices, before Claire learned that you could survive almost anything except indifference. As she walked across the gravel, she felt the stares like mosquito bites, small, constant, biting. "Is that Claire?" someone whispered. "Oh my God, that dress. Did she borrow it from a church choir?" A woman giggled behind her glass of wine. "She came alone? Poor thing." Claire kept walking, one foot in front of the other. "Don't look back. Don't cry. You've survived worse." Inside the tent, the crowd swelled. Strings of golden lights crisscrossed above guests seated at tables adorned with orchids and engraved menus. Waiters floated like ballerinas with trays of hors d'oeuvres. Claire clutched her purse tightly, one of the last things she hadn't had to sell. She spotted Sarah across the room, radiant in her gown, laughing beside her new husband. Their eyes met for a second, and Sarah gave her a brief smile, kind but distracted. Claire waved. It felt small. She found a seat in the back, next to an empty chair, and a couple too involved in each other to notice her. She sat silently, trying to disappear. The music swelled, the toasts began, and the laughter. It never stopped. At one point, a man leaned close to his date and whispered, not quietly enough, "She looks like she wandered in off the street." Claire's throat tightened. Her fingers clenched the edge of the tablecloth. The voice in her head, the one that had tormented her for months, echoed, "You don't belong here. You never did." But then she remembered. The hospital. That freezing January night, when the nurse gently pressed the release papers into her hand and told her, "You're stronger than you think, Claire." She had walked out of that psychiatric ward after 6 days of silence, carrying nothing but a paper bag of her belongings and a sliver of resolve. That sliver had gotten her this far. It had gotten her here. Now, as the wedding music shifted to a slower tempo and couples floated to the dance floor, Claire stood up. Slowly, quietly, she walked outside toward the edge of the garden, where fewer people gathered, where the air didn't feel so heavy with judgment. She found herself beside an elderly man on a bench, someone she vaguely recognized as the bride's grandfather. He looked at her kindly. "You don't dance?" Claire shook her head. "Not tonight." "Funny," he said, patting the bench beside him. "Most people come to these things to celebrate. You look like you came to mourn." Claire sat. For a moment she was silent. Then her voice came small and brittle. "I lost a lot this year. My parents, and they died in a fire last summer. My job let me go after I took too much time off to recover. And the man I was going to marry, he couldn't handle the broken version of me." The old man nodded slowly. "And yet, here you are. I promised Sarah. She was always good to me. I couldn't let her down." He smiled, eyes twinkling. "That's a rare kind of strength." Claire looked away, embarrassed. "People think I came to get attention or pity." He leaned in, voice low and steady. "Let them think what they want. People always do, but you showed up when it would have been easier to disappear. That's something they'll never understand." For the first time that evening, Claire felt her chest loosen. She wasn't here to be approved. She was here because she had survived, because despite everything, she still had a heart big enough to keep promises. And soon, that heart would lead her to something unexpected. A choice, a moment, a quiet revolution that would rewrite the story they'd written about her. She was not the girl in the wrong dress. She was the woman no one saw coming. Claire returned to the tent just as dinner was being served. She kept her eyes low, navigating between tables filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the dull roar of polite society congratulating itself. She took her seat quietly, again near the edge at a table of distant relatives she barely knew. "Claire, right?" asked a woman across from her, her voice coated in sweetness that barely veiled the contempt. Her name tag read Tory Langston, an in-law of some sort overdressed in a sequined black gown that sparkled with every false smile. Claire nodded. "Yes." Tory gave her a once-over, lips curving in a half-smirk. "So brave of you to wear something vintage. It's charming." Someone next to her snorted into their wineglass. Claire offered a polite smile, but her ears burned. The dress didn't matter. She reminded herself again, it wasn't about the dress. It was about being present. A waiter appeared beside her, setting down a delicate plate of duck breast with cranberry reduction and baby asparagus. Claire's stomach twisted. She hadn't eaten all day, but now her appetite was gone. As the night unfolded, the pattern continued. Polite small talk that wasn't polite. Compliments that were knives. Women leaning across tables to bless her heart, while their eyes screamed something else. Men with glances that hovered too long, not out of desire, but curiosity, as if trying to solve the riddle of her failure. The judgment wasn't loud. It was in the silences between conversations when others turned just slightly away. It was in the way no one asked her to dance, the way her name vanished from sentences before they reached the end of the table. Claire drank water, not wine. Her hand trembled slightly. She missed her mother most in moments like this. Her mother who used to whisper, "If you walk in like you belong, no one will question you." But what if you don't feel like you belong? That's what no one ever told her. Claire caught Sarah's eye again across the room. Her cousin gave a brief wave. Still busy, still glowing, still unreachable. And that was okay. Claire didn't come here to be rescued. She came here to prove, to herself more than anyone, that she could show up. The string lights overhead blinked softly as the wedding band struck up a familiar tune. Another slow song, another round of dancing. That's when it happened. A man she didn't recognize approached the table, clean-cut, well-dressed, with the kind of face that suggested corporate meetings and expensive suits. He held out his hand toward the woman next to Claire. "Care to dance?" Claire shifted in her seat, giving them room. But as the woman smiled and stood, her eyes lingered on Claire with a flicker of triumph. It was subtle, but it stung. She wasn't just ignored, she was pitied. And pitied people become stories, the kind that swirl over brunch tables and wine nights, usually beginning with, "Did you see what she wore?" Or, "I almost felt bad for her." Claire had lived through trauma. She'd survived a burning home, buried her parents, crawled through the darkest corners of her own mind. But somehow, this was the humiliation that made her heart ache. Not because she wanted to be admired, but because she didn't want to be erased. Then, something changed. From across the room, she noticed him. Not the groom. Not a relative. Not part of the wedding party. He stood alone near the back bar, wearing a suit that didn't need to brag. Tall mid-30s maybe, his dark hair swept back neatly, his expression calm but observant. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't laughing. He was watching. Watching her. Claire looked away quickly. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was just bored. But then she saw it again. A glance held a moment too long to be accidental. Her heart skipped once, then resumed its slow, steady rhythm. She didn't dare believe someone like that would notice her. Then again, he didn't have the eyes of someone easily fooled by glitter. Just as Claire was gathering the nerve to look back, Tori returned to the table. "Well," she announced, fanning herself dramatically, "it's officially too hot in here. Must be all that cheap perfume floating around." The table laughed. Claire didn't. Tori's gaze slid toward her. "Oh, sweetheart, don't take it personally. You've always been a little different. Sarah told me you were going through a rough time. It's just, maybe next time try not to look like it." Claire's jaw tightened. She should have stayed silent. She should have let it pass. But something in her broke. Not the fragile part, not the exhausted part, the part that remembered who she was before the fire, before the man who left, before pity became her only perfume. She stood, not rushed, not dramatic, just stood. Tori blinked. "Are you leaving?" "No," Claire said calmly, her voice carrying just enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "I'm going to do what you never could." "What's that?" Claire smiled, not bitter, not angry, just done. "Hold my dignity." And she walked, past the laughter, past the whispers, past the men who thought her silence meant shame. She didn't know where her steps would lead. Not yet. But a pair of dark eyes followed her every move. And he hadn't laughed once. Claire stepped out into the cool evening air, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the small railing near the edge of the garden terrace. Beyond the white lattice fence, fireflies blinked lazily over the grass, and the moon had begun its quiet rise. The sounds of clinking glasses and distant laughter faded behind her like a memory she didn't want to carry. She took a deep breath. The weight of the night bore down heavily. Not just the insults, not just the stares. It was the culmination of years of invisible bruises and unspoken pain. She leaned forward and closed her eyes, the wind brushing softly across her cheeks. And then the past whispered in. A flash, black smoke swirling up the stairs, her mother's voice calling her name. "Claire, get out! Don't wait for us!" The way her lungs burned, the searing heat, the sharp crack of wood collapsing. Another flash. The hospital, sterile and silent. A nurse gently handing her a bag. "Take your time. You've been through a lot." Another. Jason standing in the doorway of their apartment, his expression cold. "I can't do this anymore, Claire. You're not the same. I don't even know who you are now." She had begged. Once. Just once. Then she stopped. She wouldn't beg for love, not after surviving death. Claire opened her eyes and blinked hard. "You're not that girl anymore," she told herself. "You're the woman who showed up anyway." She turned her gaze back toward the venue, watching the blur of movement behind the windows. She didn't hate them, not even Tori. The world had always rewarded surfaces. What mattered was what she did next. "Beautiful night," a voice said from behind her. She turned. It was him, the man from the back bar. Up close, he was even more striking, not just in looks, but in stillness. The kind of stillness that came from being entirely present. His hands were in his pockets, his shoulders relaxed, but his eyes, they held hers without hesitation. "I'm sorry," he added, taking a small step forward. "I didn't mean to startle you." "You didn't." Her voice was soft, guarded, but not cold. He smiled faintly. "Good." A moment passed. "I saw what happened at the table," he said. "You handled it better than most would have." Claire shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "It's not the first time I've been talked down to. Won't be the last." "But you didn't let it define you," he said. "You walked away." She tilted her head. "Why were you watching?" He didn't flinch. "Because I noticed you when you walked in, not because of your dress or anything like that. You looked like you were holding something heavy, and still you came in with your head up. That caught my attention." Claire studied him. He wasn't flattering her. He was just telling the truth. "I'm Ethan," he added, offering a hand. She hesitated, then shook it. "Claire, you don't seem like you're here for the party," he said. "I'm not," she admitted. "I'm here for Sarah. We grew up together, haven't seen much of each other in years, but family is family." He nodded thoughtfully. "I get that." A breeze passed between them, and Claire found herself breathing a little easier. "What about you?" she asked. "You didn't look like you were enjoying the party either." "I'm a friend of the groom's," Ethan replied. Old business connection. I almost didn't come. But then again, I've made a habit lately of showing up to things that make me uncomfortable. Good practice. She smiled at that. They stood quietly for a while. The moon climbed higher, casting soft light across the garden. Then Ethan asked gently, "Can I ask what happened? Earlier, I mean. You looked like something cracked open inside." Claire looked down at her hands. For a moment she considered deflecting, laughing it off. But there was something about Ethan. He wasn't asking for gossip. He was asking because he cared. "I've had a rough couple of years," she said finally. "Lost both my parents, house fire. It changed everything. I was engaged." He left. And the grief didn't hit all at once. It came in waves, long, suffocating waves. I stopped working, stopped sleeping, started believing I wasn't worth showing up for anymore. Ethan didn't interrupt. His silence was gentle, anchoring. Claire went on, voice steadier now. "I've been clawing my way back. It's not linear. I still have bad days. But I made a promise to Sarah years ago that I'd be at her wedding. So here I am, in a $5 dress and the only heels I could afford, trying to keep my head above water while everyone around me swims in champagne." He exhaled slowly. "That's the most honest thing I've heard all day." She looked up. "That doesn't scare you off?" Ethan smiled, his expression sincere. "No. If anything, it makes me want to know you more." A strange warmth bloomed in Claire's chest. Not romantic, not yet, but human, healing. They stood side by side in silence once more, watching as guests inside swayed to a slow song. "I should go back in," Claire murmured eventually. "You should," Ethan said. "Not for them. For you." She nodded, and together they walked back toward the light, not as a couple, not as a storybook ending, but as two people who saw each other when no one else did. And that was the beginning of everything that would change. The reception had shifted into its final, more chaotic rhythm. The part of the evening where champagne loosened tongues, heels came off, and the DJ swapped string quartets for top 40 hits. The atmosphere inside the tent buzzed with laughter, swirling dresses and off-key renditions of love songs. Claire re-entered with Ethan beside her, unsure of what the rest of the night held. But she felt different. Not because of a compliment or a look, or even the promise of something new, but because someone had finally seen her without judgment, just her, and it reminded her that she was still whole, even if a little cracked. They stood near the dessert table, watching guests dance and chatter like old friends, the rhythm of the party pulling them into its current. Claire didn't feel like she needed to dance. She didn't feel like she needed to prove anything anymore. "You want cake?" Ethan asked with a slight grin. "I think I earned it," Claire replied, smiling back. She reached for a plate and selected a slice of vanilla with raspberry filling. The moment the sweet frosting touched her lips, something in her relaxed. But just as she was savoring the second bite, a voice cut across the room. "Excuse me, can I have your attention for just a moment?" It was Tori, standing center stage with a microphone in hand, one arm looped in her husband's, and a forced smile stretched too wide. "I just wanted to say a few words," she announced, her voice syrupy and theatrical. "Sarah, you look absolutely stunning. You're a vision. And Michael, well, you're lucky she said yes." Laughter followed. Claire felt her stomach tighten. "And speaking of luck," Tori continued, eyes scanning the crowd, "I think we all feel incredibly lucky tonight to be surrounded by such diverse guests. Some old friends, some new faces, and even some surprises." A beat of silence. Then, "I mean, who knew thrift fashion would make such a bold comeback?" The laughter this time was quieter, some gasps, some chuckles, some shifting in seats. But everyone knew who she meant. Claire froze. Her face flushed hot. Her fingers dug into the edge of her plate. Ethan stepped closer, his jaw tight. "Don't," Claire whispered, sensing his impulse to confront Tori. "Not yet." Tori laughed as if it were all harmless. "I'm just teasing, of course. We all know weddings bring out the best, and the most interesting in us." Claire took a slow breath. Then another. Her heart raced, not from shame but from choice, She could stay seated. She could let the moment pass. But something rose inside her. A quiet voice. Not vengeful, not bitter, powerful. She set her plate down gently and walked toward the center of the tent. The music had stopped. All eyes followed her. She stepped onto the small platform beside Tori. The microphone was still in her hand, but Claire didn't ask for it. She simply turned toward the room, her voice carrying with steady grace. "You're right," she said calmly. "Weddings do bring out the truth in people." Tori's smile faltered. Claire looked at the crowd, not angrily, but with honesty. "I came here tonight wearing a $5 dress. I came here without a date, without a designer clutch, and without anyone to vouch for my worth. And from the moment I arrived, I was reminded of it. Over and over again, in whispers, in stares, in jokes." The room was silent now. "But what you don't know," Claire continued, "is that this dress has been with me through the hardest year of my life. I wore it the day I walked into therapy for the first time. I wore it the day I visited the ashes of my parents' house. I wore it the day I said goodbye to someone who told me I was too broken to be loved." Her voice didn't crack. It soared. "I came here because I made a promise to my cousin, because I believe family means showing up, even when it hurts, even when you're not invited with open arms." She turned toward Tori now, not with rage, but with clarity. "You tried to humiliate me, but the truth is, you only exposed yourself. Because kindness isn't measured in gowns or place settings. It's measured in how we treat people when we think no one important is watching." The tent was utterly still. No laughter now, no whispers. Claire nodded once, then stepped down from the platform. As she passed Ethan, he looked at her like she was made of fire and gold. "That," he whispered, "was extraordinary." Claire didn't stop walking. She didn't need to, because people weren't laughing anymore. They were watching her. In awe, in respect, in silence. Sarah broke from the crowd and ran to her, arms wide. "Claire," she gasped, pulling her into a tight hug. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I should have been there." "You're here now," Claire whispered. The music resumed, softer this time. People turned their heads, embarrassed. Some approached with apologies, others with quiet gratitude, and some, like Tori, simply melted away. Later that night, as the party thinned out and stars stretched across the sky, Ethan walked Claire to her car. "You could have let it go," he said gently. "You didn't have to speak." She smiled. "No, I didn't. But I needed to." He nodded. "For what it's worth, that moment, you didn't just stand up for yourself. You reminded a room full of shallow people what real beauty looks like." Claire paused, her hand resting on the car door. "Thank you. For seeing me." "I couldn't not see you," he replied. And for the first time in a long, long while, Claire believed it. Not because he said it, but because she had already seen it in herself. The morning after the wedding arrived with an unexpected clarity. Claire opened her eyes in the small motel room just outside town, the pale light filtering through the thin curtains. For the first time in months, she hadn't woken with the weight of dread pressing on her chest. She felt still, steady. The night played in fragments in her mind. Tori's cruel joke, the stillness of the tent as she spoke, the flood of words she never thought she'd say aloud. And then the quiet applause, the hugs, the stunned expressions, Ethan's unwavering eyes, Sarah's arms around her. It hadn't been revenge, it had been release. She rose, splashed cold water on her face, and caught her reflection in the mirror. No makeup, no jewels, no carefully styled hair. Just her, eyes tired but bright, lips curled with a soft confidence. "This is who I am," she thought, "and that's enough." Claire packed her things, slipping the thrifted dress back into the small bag. She folded it gently, not out of shame, but out of respect. That dress had walked through fire with her. Before she left, her phone buzzed. Message from Sarah. "Hey, I know yesterday was a lot, but you were incredible. Everyone's talking about it, in the best way. Can we have brunch before you leave?" Claire smiled. She hadn't expected anything more from Sarah. That one hug would have been enough, but the invitation meant something. It meant the tide was turning. She arrived at the cafe 15 minutes later. It was a quaint spot in the historic part of town. Brick walls, sunlit windows, the smell of coffee and cinnamon. Sarah was already waiting, her wedding ring sparkling under the morning sun. She stood and pulled Claire into another hug, tighter this time. "You look so much lighter," Sarah said. "I feel it," Claire replied, settling into the chair. They ordered quickly, pancakes and tea for Claire, an omelette and espresso for Sarah. "Listen," Sarah said, folding her hands. "I owe you an apology. I should have seen how uncomfortable you were. I should have said something when Tori made those comments. I didn't protect you, and that's on me." Claire shook her head. "You had a wedding to host, and besides, I needed to stand on my own." Sarah looked at her with admiration. "Well, you didn't just stand. You soared." Claire hesitated. "Do you really think so?" "Claire," Sarah said softly, "you changed the entire energy of that room. You showed people who you are, without asking for pity, without begging for approval. You gave everyone in that tent a mirror. Some didn't like what they saw." Claire exhaled. "I guess I never expected to be seen like that, especially not while wearing a dress that cost less than a cup of coffee." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You made that dress unforgettable. People will talk about it for years, and not because of what it cost, but because of the woman who wore it." They sat in quiet comfort, sipping tea and sharing stories from childhood. It felt like coming home. And then Claire asked the question she had buried all weekend. "Tori, why does she hate me so much?" Sarah frowned. "Honestly, jealousy, I think. You've always had this quiet strength, even when things went wrong, even when you lost so much. You didn't chase validation. Tori thrives on being seen. You threaten her because you don't need the spotlight to shine." Claire considered that. "It just felt like she wanted me to disappear." "Because she needed to feel taller by making you smaller," Sarah said. "But you didn't let her." Later that afternoon, Claire walked through the small town square, the sun warm on her shoulders. Her bag hung over one arm, and her heels, those stubborn old things, were finally off. She moved with ease. She didn't need to rush. She stopped at a little bookstore she used to visit as a girl. It looked unchanged. Dusty windows, hand-painted sign, a small bell over the door. Inside, the scent of old paper wrapped around her like an old friend. She drifted toward the memoir section, fingers brushing spines gently. Then a familiar voice behind her. "Trying to disappear again?" Ethan asked. Claire turned, her smile immediate. Maybe, but not for the same reasons. He was dressed casually today. Navy shirt, worn jeans, a coffee in hand. Relaxed, real. "I didn't think I'd see you again before I left," she said. "I didn't think I'd let you leave without saying goodbye." They stood in the narrow aisle between books, light filtering through the dusty windows. "I meant what I said last night," he added. "You reminded people what strength looks like. You reminded me." Claire felt something flicker in her chest. "Thank you for standing by me." "I wasn't standing by you," Ethan said softly. "I was standing with you." The words sank deep. "I've spent so long trying to convince myself I wasn't broken," she whispered. "But maybe I don't need to prove anything anymore." He stepped closer. "You don't, not to anyone." Claire looked down, then back up at him. "What happens now?" Ethan smiled. "You go live your life. And if you want, just if, maybe I'll be part of it." Her heart didn't race. It steadied, because this wasn't a rescue. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was real. And for the first time, that was enough. The highway stretched before her, long and open, framed by golden fields and the soft blues of a cloudless sky. Claire's hands rested easily on the steering wheel of her beat-up car, the kind that rattled slightly above 60 miles per hour, but always held steady. Her motel stay was behind her, the wedding behind her, the whispers, the glances, the judgment, all left in that tent where she'd once felt so small. And yet now, she was more herself than she had been in years. A quiet confidence pulsed inside her, not loud or showy, but certain. She didn't need anyone's approval. She didn't need glittering dresses or curated photos or curated lives. She had earned something rarer. Peace. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Another message. From Sarah. The family won't stop talking about your speech. You were unforgettable. Tori hasn't shown her face since. Also, Mom asked me to tell you that you're always welcome at Christmas. No more folding chair in the corner. Claire laughed softly and blinked back tears. The folding chair had always been her place at family gatherings, tucked in at the edge of the room, near the hallway or the kitchen. Now she had a place at the real table, not because she'd demanded it, but because she'd earned it. At a rest stop near a sunflower field, Claire pulled over and stepped outside. The wind teased at her hair. She closed her eyes, the sunlight warming her skin. It was here, standing alone amid the buzz of bees and the rustling of tall flowers, that she allowed herself to remember everything. The fire, the therapist's couch, the day she sold her engagement ring, the job interview she never showed up to because she couldn't stop crying in the parking lot, the hospital gown, the nights she slept in her car, all of it. And then she pictured that moment on the wedding stage. Not the pain, but the choice. The moment she chose to speak, the moment she chose herself. She took out her phone and opened a new note. Title, What Strength Looks Like. She typed, "It's not a roar, it's not a headline. Sometimes strength is just showing up when it's easier to disappear. Sometimes it's wearing the wrong dress and staying anyway. Sometimes it's choosing not to shrink for the comfort of others. That's what I did. That's who I am." Claire had never thought of herself as a writer. But maybe her story could help someone else. Back on the road, she headed toward her small apartment. A second interview was scheduled the next week at a local non-profit that offered support for women rebuilding after trauma. Claire had almost cancelled it before the wedding, thinking she wasn't ready. Now she couldn't wait to walk through that door and say, "Let me tell you what I've survived, and let me show you what I can do." Later that evening, just as the sun melted into the horizon, her phone rang. Ethan. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she let it ring once, twice, then picked up. "Hey," she said, "you made it home." "Just pulled in," she replied. "You okay?" Claire glanced around her small apartment, still quiet, still simple, but it no longer felt like a place of hiding. It felt like a beginning. "I'm more than okay," she said. "I'm free." There was a pause on the line. Then his voice, warm and calm. "That's beautiful to hear." Claire hesitated. "I don't know what this is between us, and I'm not ready for anything big, but I'd like to see where it leads. Slowly." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Ethan said. They talked for a while longer, about books, about travel, about all the tiny details that make up a life. And when they hung up, Claire didn't feel that familiar pang of loneliness. She felt full, not because of a man, because of herself. Because she had learned that resilience isn't loud. Redemption doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in moments, in speaking when your voice shakes, in choosing grace over bitterness, in walking back into the room even when your knees tremble. She had walked into that wedding a shadow. She walked away a flame. A woman who had been humiliated, but never broken. A woman who had been mocked, but never silenced. A woman who had been overlooked, but finally seen first by herself and then by the world. And no one could take that from her, not ever again.